Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. This is the 7th and the last webinar in our business support series, and today we'll be talking about team and culture. It's been great to see so many of you return for the whole series, but we also have some new attendees today, so we will start with some introductions. So I'm Greg Guilford, I'm the CEO of HR Solutions, and we also have Joe Sword, who's the Head of Strategic Business Planning at Nordens, and he'll be the main presenter today. We also have Atim Arden, who's our digital marketing exec, and if you have any technical challenges or any other questions throughout the session, she'll be able to help you. Not only we'll try and solve your technical questions, but obviously we want you to ask as many questions as possible for Joe, and we'll answer those at the end of the session. Obviously, everyone has joined today on mute to just make this webinar flow a bit better. But to encourage you to ask those questions, we use the GoToWebinar chat panel, which you should see on your dashboard somewhere, and it will look something like this. So you probably have a questions tab there that you just need to expand and type your question in, and that will come to us as organisers, and we'll ask those questions to Joe at the end. Okay. We also try to make this as interactive as possible, so there will be a couple of polls throughout the webinar as well, so just be open and honest, and Joe will talk through those results with you as well. Throughout the session, we will encourage you to take as many notes as possible, because this is trying to make it as interactive and as useful for everybody, so make sure you got your pens and notepads to hand. And as I mentioned, today we're talking about team and culture, and I'm now going to pass you over to Joe Sword.
Cheers, Greg. Thank you very much. Yes, my name's Joe Sword. I'm the Strategic Consultancy Director at Nordens Chartered Accountants. We've worked with thousands of business owners and within their businesses over the years. And because of this, we feel like we've got the ability to support and help many of you move your business to the next level. And we want to make our advisory piece and our strategic consultancy support available to as many people as possible. So one thing that we did during the first lockdown was we created our interactive accelerator advisory program, and it's based on what we call our Wheel of Success. And there are 7 segments in our wheel, and the webinar series that we're concluding today has focused on every single one of those in turn. And we strongly believe that success in these 7 areas will lead to overall business success. And on the flip side, when you look at businesses who are quite starting to struggle, maybe failing even, they're generally attributed to one or more of those areas. So the 7 areas, well, the 6 areas that we've looked at already are your why, vision and goals, your sales and marketing, mindset, cash flow, systems and processes, and profitability. And last but no means least is the topic we're going to look at today, one of my favourites, it's team and culture. And we feel that our programme helps with some of the biggest headaches business owners face, namely advice, direction, different perspectives, and accountability. And based on this, the programme will give you that bespoke advice from our team of specialists and special guests that we often have on the sessions, access to like-minded business owners from a variety of different sectors to just give you different thoughts and perspectives, which will also enhance your support network. And over the years, we've realised that having someone offer their thoughts and perspectives from that impartial or perhaps less emotional point of view is a really underrated success factor. And you'll also have that team of people to hold you accountable, and it's proven to get results quicker. I've had conversations with clients just this week who have actually made the effort to do things they said they were going to do because they knew they were coming on the program in a couple of days' time or later on that week. And just having that in your mind can actually just be that trigger to make you and to kind of force you to sacrifice things you don't need to be doing and take on things and do and take action around things you should be doing. So these ingredients we've found are really key elements for success, and we've got that growing number of case studies from businesses and their owners who are thriving because of the program. And it's actually proven that working with others in a group setting like this can actually increase your success rate by up to 200%. So that gives a little bit of insight into the program itself. Now we'll move on to today. So today we're going to be focusing on team and culture. And like Greg mentioned, we're going to try and make it fairly interactive using the polling system where you'll get a chance to share your thoughts. So the way it will work is I'll outline the area, I'll give a few thoughts, and then there'll be some polls with questions for you to answer. Now, the answers will be anonymous, but what it will do is it will allow us to gauge where the majority of you are positioned on the areas that we're talking about. And of course, as Greg's already mentioned, if we go through and you have any problems or you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, give us a signal, and we'll do our best to help, and we'll get to your questions at the end. So, team culture. It's one of my favourite subjects. I'm quite passionate about this myself, and I feel that all strong businesses are built around a great team. Now, that doesn't just necessarily mean internal employees. External partners are also part of your wider team. And in businesses, the owners and the high-level managers, they're looked at not just as managers, but leaders who people in the organisation look up to as inspirational figures to keep them motivated and bought into that bigger picture. And I've seen in many businesses that there's often a big divide between the owners and their team. And most of it, to me, comes down to communication and the frequency of it. And my own personal story is perhaps the reason why this is one of the areas I'm so passionate about. So I joined Nordens when I was 19. Before that, I didn't really have a lot of accountancy experience. I joined as a complete junior. I was working in Tesco's before then. And I had a real passion for business. I was really interested in it. I liked the way that you compare numbers and numbers would help you make decisions. And thankfully, Mark, our chairman, Mark Norden, he gave me the chance at Nordens. But what Mark did is he set out the vision for Nordens, the business. But not only that, he made it really clear right from the early stages how I could progress and play a bigger part in this vision. And it wasn't just that one-off grandstand yearly conversation. It was really, in my mind, the really clever thing that Mark continued to do was mention and refer back to that bigger, stronger vision for the business on a regular basis. So whether that was when we were going to a meeting or just having a general chat, he'd often find a way to bring the topic round to the vision and how I fitted into the future. So what it did is it sort of ingrained in me, and over time I became as passionate about realising the vision as Mark is. So I'd like to jump straight into a poll to start off, and I'd like to just know, firstly, how often do you communicate the vision for your business to your team members? Do you do it weekly or monthly? Do you do it sort of annually once a year, or do you hand on heart you don't feel that you really do? So it'd be I'm quite curious just to see this, because to me it's a really, really big factor. So I think Greg will leave the poll open for about a minute or so, and just be totally honest, you know, like I said, the answers are anonymous, but we'll just see overall percentage term what you're all saying.
Okay, about 70% have completed so far, so we'll just give it a few more seconds for anyone who's still thinking. Okay, I'm going to close it and share. Okay,
so we've got a mixture. But those of you that are communicating your vision to your team members on a weekly or monthly basis, I'd say you're in the right place. I think that's fantastic. If you can get it across, and when we're saying communicate, we're not talking about hour-long speeches in front of the whole team. It's that little bit of insight, that little bit of coaching that you can drop in there. And when you're telling stories or when you're celebrating people's success, bring it back round to saying, look, that's why we do this in our business. You know, this is a great example of us moving closer to our vision because of what you've done there. So that's a really powerful way of doing it. Those of you that are communicating the vision annually, you probably could do it a little bit more frequently. But like I said, maybe after what I've just explained, it might be that you are doing it more frequently, but you have maybe a bigger presentation on an annual basis. But if you are in that sort of percentage where you're basically only really talking about the vision for the business once a year in the sort of annual event or whatever it is, I'd consider doing it a little bit more frequently, because I don't think it's frequent enough to really deeply embed it within people and get them to really buy into it personally. And for those of you that said that we don't, honestly, one of the biggest things that we've learned as a business as well is the communication and the regular communication, the regular emphasis on the bigger picture, the bigger achievements that we're trying to make, our real core purpose. It's so important to do it not just do it, but do it regularly. So I think maybe that might be something to jot down for those of you that are thinking, well, we don't really. I think maybe start small, like I've said throughout this whole series. Just don't try and change the world in a day. Just start small. So what can you do when's the next time you'll all get together as a business, or when's the next time that you've got the opportunity to just mention your vision to your team members, whether that's as a big group or just with your managers. It doesn't really matter too much to start off with. Just start the process of making people more aware and making that vision more present in people's minds. One other thing that we do as well is we have our vision and our brand values dotted around our office. Now, I do appreciate we're in COVID at the moment and we're on the verge of coming out of it. So the office working situation may not be as it was, but I think that's often a really powerful way to keep reminding people of why they're here, why we're here as a business. These are the values that we bring to the table. This is the vision for our business. This is why we do it. So at Nordens, our vision is to help every business owner and every person even that we work with identify and achieve their goals. And we've got that and the related values dotted around the office. So it's always present. And I think just little things like that can really make a big difference. So that's interesting that we've got a mix of people on the call today. And we'll see how things develop as we go forward. But that's the one sort of takeaway I would really recommend from that part. Now, one story that I really love, and people have heard me on a webinar before or have worked with me in the past will probably have heard me say it before, but I love this story from NASA where the president of the United States was doing a tour of their base shortly before they made their successful moon landing attempt. And he was walking around and he noticed a cleaner in one of the hallways. And he approached the cleaner and he stopped to have a quick chat with him. And he asked him, "What do you do here?" He obviously knew he was a cleaner, but he was just curious about how he would respond. The cleaner turned around, he looked straight into the president's eyes and said, "I'm here to help put a man on the moon." And to me, that perfectly illustrated a team culture where no matter how indirectly everyone in the organisation believes in the vision and they feel they are playing their part towards it. So to me, it's so important that you're keeping and creating a culture that aligns with your vision by bringing on like-minded people. And coming back to my own personal example, Mark's regular chats with me left me feeling hugely motivated as I could see that Mark believed in me, believed in the vision, and he believed that I would play a part in that vision. And it made me really keen and hungry to progress. And this really resonated with what Nordens were looking to do as a business. So it was a really good fit. And not everyone will have the same growth mindset as the business owner though, but they don't need to. But you have to really spend time with people to find out what motivates them. So you can adapt your communication in a way that actually resonates with them. And to me, this starts really right at the beginning in the recruitment stage. I find that a lot of interviews are very focused on technical expertise and experience, which of course it is important. I'm not downplaying the importance at all, but I think there needs to be a bit more of a mix or a bit more of a blend. So it's really vital that you go some way to determining that person actually fits into your culture. Otherwise, even with the technical experience, they might not be the right fit for your business. So some stars in your organisation will sort of naturally exhibit the traits you need and want, whereas some may need just that little bit of support, direction or clarity. And that may be the difference between them being a complete star or someone who's just sort of coasting or being along for the ride. One thing that I've used that I found really quite useful is trying to understand my team members is DISC analysis. Some of you may already be well aware of this, and it's a good starting point in helping you to really understand your team members, but also understand yourself as well. And I remember that when I did it, I realized that my sort of generic style would perhaps rub people up the wrong way, or it might not get the best out of other people, but it really worked well with others. And because I started to understand a little bit more about my team members and the other people in Nordens' generic styles, I could start looking at adapting my offering, adapting my sort of the way that I would communicate with them. So it made it a bit more easy to get the results that both I and they wanted. So it was a really useful tool, and I think there are online ones out there that you can do, like sort of headline-wise, for free. So it would be something to consider if you've not ever looked at that before, DISC analysis for you and your team. But often one of the biggest issues that we see in businesses that we work with is that they have the wrong people. So either in the wrong place or they're just wrong for the business, full stop. And that can really start spreading that toxic atmosphere and lead to sort of unrest throughout the organisation. And business owners can tend to be really loyal, and they'll often magnify the problem that they've got by being too loyal to their team members who are just really not right for them. And they retain the poor performing team members, which not only leads to poor performance from them, but it actually results in other people starting to look at that and saying, well, do I really want to be involved in this organisation or this business that's keeping people who are coasting, or they're just not the right people? But the reason that I find this happens quite a lot is that businesses often recruit in desperation. So where a business starts to scale and is on that growth path, but they become really busy really quickly, and they just need people to fill the gaps, and they just sort of accept that extra misalignment than you normally would if you weren't under that type of pressure. So we try our very best to adopt the approach, always be recruiting. You're not obliged to hire people, of course, but you might be able to find someone that's worth investing in for the longer term. You could maybe perhaps find that right person or future star, maybe before you have a full workload for them. But you've got to ask yourself, if you're growing your team with the right people and can look at incorporating things like training into that gap, where they may not be completely busy right away, but if you can adapt and put some of your time towards more training to get other team members up to speed quicker, then all of a sudden everyone moves forward quicker. So I would urge against making recruitment decisions when you become desperate. And I think this is part of the reason we've been really keen to partner with the team here at HR Solutions, because what we've found in the past is that HR is often seen as that necessary evil when things have hit a critical point. But the team at HR Solutions try and become that trusted partner to work hand in hand with you to sort of proactively stimulate the development of people and tackle those issues before they become critical. So your HR function, to me, is really important as you look to scale your business, and done right, it can be that sort of trusted partner that works with you alongside you rather than just being a phone call away when there's a real issue. And one other thing that we found in terms of our recruitment is incorporating those brand values and culture values into our interview process. So we've asked candidates that have applied for roles within Nordens sort of the standard sort of technical questions we need them to kind of make us feel confident they can do the role, but ask them to explain times where they've demonstrated some of your business's brand values, because this is often a little bit unexpected and it gives you a real insight into their character and their ability to think on their feet, and it really does sort of open up to them as a person. So that's something that we've done with quite a lot of success in recent times. So off the back of what we've just been talking about, I'd like to open up the polls again to ask a couple of questions this time. So in terms of the proactiveness of your recruitment, what we've just been saying, do you sort of recruit quite reactively, where you're a case of, look, we really need someone now, we've become overwhelmed with work, let's get someone in as quickly as possible? Are you sort of more towards that side than proactive, or are you more proactive in terms of your recruitment? And when we say proactive, do you recruit perhaps earlier than you effectively are forced to, so to speak? So yeah, which one of those options sort of sits best with you right now?
Okay, so quite a few people have voted already. We're about 60%, so just give it a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close and share.
Okay, so a good mixture again. So those of you that are very proactive, fantastic. And I think it's a case of you're doing what you should be doing, recruiting proactively. How can you just keep that sustainable as you look to scale your business and things change within your business? Slightly proactive, so you're doing certain things you maybe for certain roles you are, but I think maybe then how can you expand that and grow on that to maybe make that move you into the very proactive box, so to speak. So it sounds like you're on the right track, might just need a little bit of a tweak in certain areas, perhaps certain departments, perhaps not as proactive with their recruitment drive. And I think it comes a lot down to forward planning. You know, where do you want your segment, your department, your business to move forward to, and then you can spot where the gaps are in the team that you need for that. And for those of you that are pretty reactive or very reactive, you're far from alone. We see it a lot, like we've said, we've helped a lot of businesses overcome that, and they've moved that transition, and they all feed back to us to say it's one of the best things we've ever done, sort of adapting our recruitment process so reactive, because it just brings a lot of pressure. And when you're recruiting reactively, there's a lot of pressure for the people you recruit to hit the ground running and immediately become a star. And it doesn't always work like that in process. So I really would recommend that for those of you that are saying you're pretty reactive, and those of you that are saying you're very reactive, to just maybe have a little look at that away and say, well, what can we do? The simple things, like we said, start slowly. What's the one thing you could do to sort of maybe move you up a notch in the boxes there, to say that, look, we're adapting our style now. We're no longer going to completely reactively. We're going to start adopting a bit more of a proactive approach. And the next poll that we'd like to, the next sort of questions I'd like to ask you, how often do you, as a business, incorporate your purpose, vision, and brand values into your interview questions, so to speak? Is it one of the fundamentals within your interviews? Do you always do it? You sometimes do it, but it's a bit ad hoc and it's not consistent. Or do you never do it? Have you never really thought about that?
Okay, we've got about 50% have completed so far, so we'll just give it a few more seconds.
Cool. And again, you might be in between boxes, so just go with the one that you feel is more realistic for where you are at the moment.
Okay, and close and share.
Okay. So those of you that do it always, again, it's the strategy we've adopted with good results, I believe. So I think I'd continue to do that. And just, again, as you look to grow and scale and maybe others take more responsibility, how can you just make sure that stays consistent and it forms part of your overall system and your overall interview system within your business? Sometimes, I suppose the question would be why? Why only sometimes? Why isn't it structured in a way that you would do it on an ongoing basis? Because I think no matter what role it is, I think asking those sort of questions around the purpose, vision, and the brand values specifically that we do, I think can really tell you a lot about the people themselves that you're looking to recruit. And those of you that have said never, we didn't do it originally, we'll be honest, but I think since we've incorporated, we haven't looked back. We wouldn't consider not doing it now. So I think it's one of those things that once you start doing it, you realise that the interview tells you a lot more about the people than perhaps the way you would have done it before. It's something to really consider adopting into your interview processes. So no, that's interesting, because it seems like we've got a good mix of where people are positioned at the moment. So often business owners will sort of know that someone isn't right in their organisation and they're considering removing a team member. But like we said earlier, they'll hesitate or sort of stop out of loyalty to them and start looking at the situation from a bit more of a personal point of view. So they're a nice person. They do work hard. They do some things right, and start sort of justifying the decision to not make the ultimate decision to remove them, so to speak. But so when I work with when I work on with our clients in areas like this, I just say to the business owner or the person in charge of that team member, ask yourself 3 key questions, and if you can answer yes confidently to all of them, you can reassure yourself that you're making the right business decision. Because generally, I'd like to think not many people out there want to be nasty. They don't want to remove people from business unless there's a real reason, and it's very often quite tough to make that leap and say, look, enough's enough now, I'm going to make that decision. But if you're able to justify to yourself that it's the right business decision, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about when we're removing people, it needs to be the right decision for the business and nothing else. It's not personal, it's a business decision. But it's often hard when there's a personal emotional attachment to the person. So the 3 questions that I ask the business owners or the clients that we work with to ask themselves is, firstly, have you explained the vision and how their role is essential in contributing to that vision? Because like I said earlier, if you've not really hand on heart honestly explained where the business is going and how they are important in getting the business there, they may not be bought in because they don't really know what the future holds for them. And sometimes that's all it takes for someone to really step up and change their mindset and change their contribution to the team. The other question I would say is, have you been approachable and have offered them the necessary support and all the tools to give them the best chance of carrying out their role appropriately? Sometimes that's a failing in businesses. You know, you feel like you've given them the support, but when it comes to it, you look at it objectively and you're like, you know what, we probably could have supported them a bit more. We probably haven't really given them the resources to give them the best chance. So again, you've got to objectively look at that. And then probably equally important, have you spent enough time sort of actively listening to them so you actually understand their perspective? Because it's proven that team members who feel listened to perform significantly better. So if you look at the way that you act at the moment, the way that it happens in your business, and you think, well, do you know what, we're quite dictatorial, we quite just give orders, it's likely that you're going to end up with a more unmotivated team than if you spent time actively listening to them. But if you can answer yes to all of those three questions, and you've explained the vision and the purpose, and you've done it on more than one occasion, you know, explain it once when they first joined probably is the same as not really explaining it on a regular basis. Have you been approachable and you've given them the support and the tools? And have you listened to them? If you can say, look, hand on heart, I can honestly feel comfortable saying yes to all of those three things, and you're still unhappy with that person, chances are they're not the right fit and they're not going to be the right fit. And the one thing that I also suggest is to visualize starting your business from scratch, and you could rebuild your team with whoever you wanted. Would you actively recruit that person in question? If no, the answer is another indicator that you need to make a decision, because if you don't, things are unlikely to get better and you're going to become in a worse and worse position. And like I said earlier, it is likely to start rubbing off on the other team members as well, because they will see that person and they will see that they're not doing what they should be, they're not the right fit, and it will start potentially rubbing off on them, or perhaps saying, look, I feel I can make a bigger impact somewhere else and I'm going to consider leaving. So it's a tough decision, no doubt about it. We fully understand it, but I think there is a time and a place where you just have to say enough's enough. And of course, goes without saying, whenever you're looking to remove people from your business, it's vital that you're getting the right HR advice, and that's where the team at HR Solutions come in, of course. So I often encourage business owners to encourage their team members to come forward with ideas. And I appreciate that that's sometimes quite scary as well, because it could lead you to questioning yourself and your own ability, because you know what it's like. It's a case of, well, if they can do it better than me, what does that mean about me? I should always stay ahead of my team members. But the question I suppose you have to ask yourself in that respect is, if implemented successfully, will this idea move the business closer to its goals? And if the answer is yes, then it's a no-brainer. And by not implementing it or suppressing it because you're a bit worried that it may maybe perhaps impact you negatively, you're actually getting in your own way. So I feel an ideas culture is really important in all growth businesses. And I think one of the biggest things the really successful business owners and the successful people that work high up in businesses accept is that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room all the time. And if you've got that capable team working with you who are comfortable and confident to share ideas, you've got a really winning formula there. And I think, coming back to my own story, I think that's one of the things that was really good about what Mark did and the way Mark built Nordens, because he helped people spread their wings and shape Nordens to what it is today. You've got Mitch Hahn, who heads up the firm as the CEO. You've got myself and 3 other junior partners who have progressed through to become directors and owners of the business, you know. And like I said, I use my story. I started at Tesco's when I was 19, joined the firm with no accounting experience, and I'm a director partner at the firm now. And I think if I can do it, anyone can do it. But I think it was only possible because Mark gave us the ability to put our own personality on things, come up with ideas and spread our wings, so to speak. And it's easier said than done. And it is nervy, you know. Most entrepreneurs have an element of control, of being a control freak, because they've wore every hat in the business when they're first starting out, and we totally accept that. But as when you're making that transition, you realize that if you don't change something and allow the people underneath you in the business to branch out and put their own stamp on things, you'll create that ceiling for yourself as the entrepreneur where you're not able to progress any further and you're not able to achieve what you want. And I think Mark was very good at understanding, realizing that, because he basically said, enough's enough now. I'm now basically in charge of everything. And I don't want that anymore. It's not allowing me to get what I want. I mean, I'm not enjoying myself in that, doing that either. So, Joe, I want you to take responsibility for these areas. What areas do you enjoy? What areas? And Mark didn't even have to ask me what areas I enjoyed, because he'd worked with me so closely over the years. He knew what I enjoyed. He knew what Mitch enjoyed. He knew what Paniotta and the other partners that have come on board enjoyed. So he just sort of coordinated it. And it was really, really clever the way he did it. But what it did is it allowed us to all stay motivated, and we could see how we could progress. So I think it's really, really important, alongside encouraging ideas and outlining the vision, you're also setting your team members targets to work towards, because it's not just a case of being really fluffy and saying, right, well, you go and do what you like, you go and do what you like. There has to be some element of tangible target there, because you won't be able to really measure the success well enough and frequently enough. So a training program is also massively important, because it will allow your team members to develop. And not only will it make it clearer that the business and therefore yourself are progressing towards your goals, your team members will actually see that tangible success along the way. So we've got two final questions before we open up the floor for further questions. The first one is, do you set clearly defined targets for all your team members? So you either do for everyone, you don't for anyone, or you do somewhat. And when we're talking about the targets, real emphasis on the clearly defined part. Are they clearly defined? Is it really easy to understand? Or do you think, well, they're a little bit vague actually? So if they are vague, but you set them for everyone, put in the somewhat box, because there may be a little bit of tweak you need to do there, because that's one of the things that we've really found, where targets are set, but when you drill down into them, it's a bit grey, you know, that could be open to misinterpretation. So the targets have to be really clear to be as successful as they can be. So yeah, I think a few more seconds, I imagine, and then we can see where you are with your target setting.
Yeah, I'm going to close it now and share it.
Okay, so another mixture. So yeah, so like what we were saying, the people that have answered somewhat, you've obviously answered that for a reason. There's obviously maybe some little things niggling at you that you're feeling, you know what, we could maybe tweak that. We can maybe make the targets or the goals a bit more smart, so to speak. For those of you that said yes, brilliant. Again, it's more about keeping up with that. How can that continue to be done? And is there any areas that you could maybe make them a little bit better? Always look to be reassessing on a regular basis, you know, because we spoke earlier about, I think it was the systems and process session, where we were looking at how things can become quite complacent if you just leave them over time. So keeping your finger on the pulse there is important. And for those of you that don't set targets for your team members, I'd strongly encourage you to have a little look at that away from today's session, because it's one of those things that if people aren't targeted, it could just go all over the place, you know. So I think there needs to be targets, and depending on the industry you're in, the business you're in, and even the department you're in, your targets will vary massively. But I think for you as a business owner, you need to look at what sort of targets or KPIs, so to speak, you would want to see to allow you to make the decision that the business is running smoothly. And that's what we've set up at Nordens. We've got a whole reporting process. So every single day, the directors get updated with our KPIs, so we can see and judge whether the business is running the way it needs to be. And then, of course, if there's any sort of triggers that we're saying, well, we're a bit below where we should be on that part, we can then ask for more detail. So it's a really good exercise as a business owner, or anyone ranking high up in a business, to look at your KPIs and what information, headline information. We often say, if you could only see 5 pieces of information, what will those 5 things be that would allow you to say, I feel reasonably confident and comfortable that the business is running the way it should be. So that's a really good exercise to do. And maybe sometimes it's often worth having a look, doing that with some of your kind of higher ranking team members or some of your managers, to brainstorm that as a group, because again, that's the sort of the buy-in process that I feel is really, really valuable. If they help you set that, often that can be a game changer, because they're automatically bought in then. So there's one other question for you all before we open the floor, and I think it's around your sort of training and your development. So how many of your team have a clear development plan in place? And I've put percentages in there just to make it a little bit easier to answer. So 100%, obviously, everyone in your business has a clear development plan in place. And when we say development plan, we mean an outline and a sort of a progression path. It doesn't have to be forever, but it should be at least the next stage. They've got a clear visual of what they need to be doing and where they're heading. 3/4 of you, 50% of the team, or less than 50%. So again, yeah, let's.
Okay, so 70% have completed. So I'm going to close the poll now and share it.
Wow. Okay. There's some people out there 100% brilliant. Again, people that have answered 100%. Again, it's just about how can you just continue to make that sustainable. You know, how can that continue as the business scales, as the business grows, as the business develops, so that doesn't fall in the way. Because we have seen it in the past where businesses have this sort of structure set up, but as they grow and as they scale, things fall away, and sometimes the development plans, the development chats, the setting goals for the team members can often be one of those things that is not consciously, but actually just subconsciously sacrificed because the business just starts becoming overwhelmed and over busy. Those are the 50% plus, you're over halfway there, which is great. But again, it's a case of, well, how is that actually working for the 50% that you do? I'd like to think it's working well. So if it is, why is it not happening for the rest of the team? So I think that's something to implement. And less than 50%, obviously, hopefully some of the things that we touched on today emphasize why that's so important to have that clear development plan for your team. And it's something that you can maybe look to put in process. But again, like I've said throughout today, it's about not trying to change the world and have a development plan in place for everyone by tomorrow. It's a step-by-step gradual approach. You need to spend time with your team to actually understand what motivates them. But first things first, get really clear on where you as the business want to go, because when you're clear on where you want to go as a business, you can then start moving things and positioning the roles and the responsibilities for people a lot better. If you yourself as the business owner or the senior manager within the business don't know where you or your department are heading, it's going to be quite difficult to encourage people to move towards that because you don't even know where it is yourself. So I think step one would be get really, really clear if you're not already on where the business is heading. And then it's a case of, right, how do these people, how do these roles fit into this progression plan, vision plan for the business? So those of you who've got a bit of work to do, don't overly panic, but as long as you make conscious effort to start and make changes there, you will get there. We've seen it hundreds of times with businesses we've worked with, but I think starting is often the hardest thing. Once you make that start, once you make that leap, it really makes a big difference, you know, and you start building that momentum and all of a sudden you feel like, yeah, we are making progress here, and you get it done a lot quicker than you probably could even think. So I'd like to think that the aim is to have 100% of your team having that clear development plan in place, because you'll be in a really strong position then as a business. And some of you may be really, really happy with your current team. And I think sometimes it's good to think about the good traits that makes your team, that particular department, so gelled. And how can you sort of ensure that it doesn't fall away and remain sustainable, like we said before? So even when things are good, it's a case of how can we sort of fuse that across other departments who may not be as good? What are the good traits and the good things that that particular team do that we can maybe pick out and move across to other teams? And I think it's just equally as important to continue to reinforce that positive culture as you progress towards your goals, and wherever possible look to encourage people to champion the culture, you know, because like we sort of said earlier, you as the business owner or the senior management team don't have to do everything yourself. And if you can get people at lower levels or at different levels to champion the culture as well, you know, look for those influencers within your business who can really get people to listen to them somewhat. And we found that sometimes they can be really, really positive or negative influences in your business. And I think if you can work with them and understand what makes them tick, if you can get them on side, so to speak, and then start championing the things all the way through the organization, all of a sudden you have a really, really strong message going up and down throughout your business. But again, the last thing was just make sure you're spending and allocating some time to properly listen to your team and understand what it is that drives them. Because once you know that, you'll really have a real strong opportunity to position what you want and allow them to get what they want, so everyone gets what they want. So I think that sort of concludes. I know I do appreciate we haven't had loads of time. Team and culture is one of my most favourite subjects, and I think I could talk about it for hours personally. I find it really interesting. But I'd just like to say, before we open the floor to questions, because this is the last webinar, thanks for everyone that's attended. I hope it's helped, and I've really enjoyed being part of the series with the team from HR Solutions, and I hope you've all found it useful. So one thing I'd like to say, as part of our vision to help as many business owners as possible identify and achieve their goals, we're happy to offer everyone that's listened to the series a complimentary business strategy session with ourselves. So if that's of interest, please let myself or Greg or the team know, and we'll be in touch. And one of the biggest challenges we find that many business owners face is that the support network is actually quite limited, leaving them with very few or sometimes no people to regularly talk to, which means that they often sort of lack reassurance or a differing perspective for their decisions that are about to make. Something that we found is really key. They can keep things bottled up, and they can often go off course when working towards their goals, or lack the time to focus or set regular goals. And they then don't have, because of this, they don't have anyone to hold them accountable for these goals. So working with a coach or an advisory consultant on a regular basis, it's proven to help you get better results quicker. And if you look out wider, so every successful business owner, every high-level team member, every successful athlete, or any successful people, they all use or have support of coaches or trusted advisors in some way, shape or form. And that's where we feel like we can really use our skills and expertise to support as many of you as possible. So if you'd like to find out more about us or how we can help you in your business, just get in touch. I think Greg's going to be doing a poll to close anyway, but yeah, if you'd like to have a conversation or a chat, just honestly get in touch with us. Like we said, complimentary, because you've been part of the webinar series and you've listened to it, we'd be happy to have that conversation, that complimentary strategy session with you, and we feel we could add value to you and your business. So I think that's pretty much it from me. Now we're going to open the floor for some more questions. Hopefully you've got some for us. And yeah, over to Greg again.
Yes, I just left that poll up for people to indicate whether they'd like to take you up on your complimentary business strategy session. I can't even speak. And then we'll share those results with you. So most people have voted on that now. So I'm going to close that. So yes, we're on to some questions. So some questions have come in for you, Joe. So the first one we have is, what are some things you've done to help create and maintain that team culture?
Okay, so well, we've done quite a few things, to be honest. So one of the things that we've done was the sort of team afternoons or away days. They're such a great way to relax and get team members talking to each other, especially if you work in a big organisation where departments perhaps don't interlink as much as in other businesses. So finding out more about each other and building that trust and bond, you can sort of really take it further. And a couple of the things that we've done on our away days, we've done some team games and activities. We're mixing the groups up so people are interacting and looking and working with different people that they don't always talk to on a regular basis, and it just helps build that sort of family spirit. And I think sort of following on from that, the sort of team and group incentives, so having those business-wide targets or themes, it creates that sort of, you know, that tangible direction for everyone to work towards. And we do this every quarter, or we had done until lockdown kind of stopped us at being able to use our visuals as much. But we had a big board in the office, and it had a visual on it every quarter of something different, that allowed the people in each of the teams and the people across the business to start moving the pieces around or changing whatever we were doing. So to give you a few examples, so we climbed a mountain, so we had a mountain visual and all the teams had their route up the mountain, and together as a team we all moved forward. We ran a marathon, so we had a big visual of a racetrack and the teams were going around the racetrack, and completed the biggest game of Tetris ever, so all the teams had different colours and different bricks. So the visuals just make it a bit fun and encourage that friendly competitiveness between the different departments at times as well. You can see that people push themselves and their mini teams to sort of be first in the race, so to speak. And obviously, like I said, with COVID and less people in the office, it is a bit more difficult, but I think that's where you can sort of use your initiative and come up with different creative ideas to continue to build that team spirit. Another thing that we've done and we do really well, I feel, is to celebrate wins. So if someone does something over and above, shout about it and celebrate it from the rooftops. I mean, it's going to make the individual who did it feel great and hopefully motivate others to follow suit. And you're also setting a benchmark for what's possible too. But like everything else with team-wide communication, how you communicate is the most important thing, and you need to really be clear on why that person's done something so special, so it actually is really meaningful. We have what we call our branding book or our branding document, where people who work with others within our business, they jot down sort of examples and stories of things that they have done that resonate with our brand values. So every single quarter, Sharon, our practice manager, and Marissa, our head of internal communication, between them will nominate a branding champion winner for the quarter. So someone who's demonstrated over and above our branding values, and they've got the stories behind it. And it's just really nice to look and read some of those stories about what people have done in our team. It's really uplifting. One of the other things that we've done, set up a group, so make the most of technology such as Slack, Microsoft Teams, various other things like that. They're really, really good, because historically we've just used email Outlook, and had email groups and things like that. But things like Slack or Teams are often a much better way of just getting quick messages across. And like I sort of mentioned earlier, asking for input, it's really, really important, and it's amazing how powerful it is. So just asking for someone's opinion on something can really make them feel valued. So if you don't already do this, really, really encourage you to give it a try. Things like team member surveys are a really good way to get a gauge on trends across your team or your overall organisation. And promoting that ideas culture, it is, like we mentioned, it's sometimes quite scary to promote and implement other people's ideas. And after all, for business owners listening, it's your business. You should have all the ideas and answers, right? Well, yeah, but like we said, if you want to create a really poorly paid job for yourself, or you want to put that ceiling on your head, then yes. But if you're really, really passionate about building your business to scale, you'll have to let go of the reins, or at least some of the reins, and embrace other people's ideas. And if you take that on board now, you'll avoid that concrete ceiling being in place, which will ultimately lead you to be really frustrated. So yeah, and I think it's one of those things, like we said earlier, if you're able to embrace other people's ideas, they will help you propel your business forward. So there are a few things that we've been doing in the background over the last few years that I feel have really helped us and build our family and team sort of culture within our business.
That's great. Thanks, Joe. So another one, so thank you for everything you discussed today. But then what the question is, what would you say is the most important thing when building a great team?
I think there's lots of things, but I think the regular communication, I think to me, is just so important. And I know from my own personal experiences, when team members can sort of feel like they're left out in the cold, it really can have a detrimental effect on their performance. And one of the things that we've implemented, and we've pushed it forward, we pushed it home even more so than during lockdown, because we've not been able to physically see each other, is just having those daily check-ins. We in our team, we have every single morning. Sometimes they only last a couple of minutes, but it's just nice to say hello to your team, just check in, make sure there's no issues, any great stories that they've shared from the day before, what they've been up to, any sort of that they can share. Really, really useful. And I think talking and the regular communication, it emphasises their importance. It makes them feel listened to, and it's a great way for you as well to get your message across and sink in. So like we were talking about earlier, regularly communicating the vision and other messages that relate to that vision. Having an ongoing chat with your team, like we said, it doesn't have to be hour-long meetings. Quick, sometimes just as valuable. But in my mind, it's more important to do it short and often than one massive lengthy meeting on a sort of a regular or an ad hoc basis. So that probably out of everything, I think you can engage and develop so much just from the communication, the two-way communication, the you speaking, but also you listening is just as important. So that's probably the starting point. If you are feeling like, ask open questions and listen to your team members' responses. See where they're actually feeling. See how they're actually feeling, I should say. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Joe. I think we've just got time for one last question. Any questions we don't get to, we'll we'll send on to Joe, and he can reach out to you separately if that's okay. So the last one is, how often should you do appraisals with team members?
This is a really good one. There's probably a variety of different opinions on this subject, but funny enough, I was listening to something yesterday where it said that Adobe, the software company that to do the PDFs, they said they used to do yearly appraisals with their team members, and they've stopped doing that now altogether. They don't even do annual appraisals. They just do ongoing coaching and development chats. I think it's one of those things, and I think in my mind, and the way I feel like I was appraised, I don't really feel like myself and Mark in the early days had formal appraisals on a basis per se, but what I think Mark did is I think he appraised me every time we interacted, and I think that's how you really should be with your team. You should be appraising them every time you interact with them, because if you find an area they could develop, or you find something they've done really well and you're really proud of them, you wouldn't wait to the annual appraisal to tell them that, would you? I think it's one of those things is appraise them as often as possible, giving them guidance, direction, and support. I've seen a lot of businesses who do the once yearly a formal, really formal appraisal with their team, and I don't think that formalising your appraisal once a year is a bad thing in itself. But if that's the only thing that you're doing, and it's the only really development focused conversation you have with your team all year, I just believe that neither you or them will get a lot from it. So like I mentioned before, I think the frequent conversations are so essential, and expecting you to recap on a whole year or analyse everything properly in one appraisal meeting once a year, to me, it just doesn't work. So I would say informally as often as possible, and still have a formal development focused chat, because it is a good idea to write it down or document it somewhere. But I think it's a case of once a year is far too long. So I'd say at the very, very minimum, I would be looking to have quarterly development catch-ups. And again, you don't need to block the whole afternoon out per team member for these. They don't have to be long, drawn-out things. But I think if you can identify some really good quality, smart, clear goals for your team members, then it becomes a catch-up with how they're getting on. But realistically, when you're appraising people or having these development chats, nothing should come as a shock, because you should be talking to them on such a consistent, regular basis that if there are any issues, you've already spoken about it already. So I think, to me, it's one of those ongoing things where you're always chatting to your team, you're always appraising them as you go. But yes, of course, I think there should be an element of formalisation to that. Once a year for the formalities, in my mind, is okay. But the way we do it is we have a once a year annual appraisal, and then 3 times a year we have quarterly, three times a year we have development updates where we will chat with the team members about the development points. But coming back to what I said right at the start, the thing that Mark was particularly good at when he was appraising me, he would always find a way, with whatever the subject was talked about, he'd find a way to bring that back to one of my development areas, or the future vision, or the longer term goals for the business. If you continue to do this, this is going to hamper your chances of being able to progress to here. And I think if you can reframe it that way, it's so powerful, because you've found that motivator in that person already, and you're basically saying you can't have that until you change, or you're on the right track towards that. So I hope that's a bit of a long-winded way of answering the question, but I think the quality of the appraisal is really important as well. I think as the appraiser, you should spend the majority of your time listening as opposed to speaking. I've seen and I've been aware of appraisals where the appraiser will just talk at the employee or the team member for the whole session, and it's a case of you didn't give them any chance to get a word in. You just talked at them, and it's not a good way. They're not going to come off of that appraisal feeling like they've achieved much, I don't believe. And it's sometimes the way it's set up, and change it. That's the thing. Just because you've always done it that way, it doesn't have to be that way. So yeah, and I think getting feedback from team members is, you've got to be careful with it, but it's also another good way, because remember, you may not see everything that everyone else sees in your organisation. So get feedback. That's one thing we do. We get feedback from people who work with the other team members. So it's a bit more of a 360 approach as opposed to just your interpretation of things. So they're just, I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent there, but there are a few things that I'd consider in terms of your appraisals.
No, that's great, Joe. Thank you for your insights on those questions and answers. So just to sort of conclude the webinar. Hopefully everyone took lots of notes today and you found that useful. Obviously this was the last, unfortunately, of our 7-part series on business support, but they have all been recorded, and there'll be a link to those recordings after the webinar. Just to remind some people of some of the other upcoming webinars that we've got. So how serious allegations can be handled safely, what are protected or without prejudice conversations, and remote working, how can you manage performance, is one that's really popular at the moment. Then anybody who's not already signed up to our newsletter, there'll be a link on the email that follows up as well, just to encourage you to sign up to our news and be kept abreast of upcoming events as well, so you can join our future webinar program to be the first to hear about them. And then obviously we didn't get to all the questions today, so and if there is any other questions you've got from today or any of the sessions we've done with Joe and his team, then please do email them to inquiries@hrsolutions-uk.com, and we'll make sure to pass those over to Joe and his team to respond to you. Just leaves us to follow up to say on that email you have a link to some feedback as well. We obviously want to learn from everything we've done with Joe and his team, and plan future webinars as well to make sure we're addressing topics that you're interested in. That just leaves me to say thank you once again to Joe for running this business support webinar series with us. I think it's been really useful for everybody, and there's certainly been a lot of engagement throughout the sessions. So yeah, we'll have to plan something next when we get some feedback.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening. Really enjoyed it. Hope it's helped.
Brilliant. Speak to you all soon.